All right, thank you for staying with the Monday Report. Let's see some of your feedback on what you're saying in terms of what should we do to win this war against corruption. At Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya is the hashtag Monday Report. Let's bring that up on your screen. Agumba Steve says, as long as those who have had corruption-related cases still get appointed into offices, we will keep being a corrupt nation. No strides at all. Okay? Kate Besk says we are lying to ourselves when we say we are winning the war on corruption. The public service is riddled with it. It is a get-rich-quick culture that ensures survival. Culture change will only end it. Okay. Clinton says in Kenya, most of the graft cases are highly politicized. It only depends on which side of the politics you associate with. Okay. Washika says the most high-profile corruption cases revolves around senior politicians in the country. Until and unless a time comes when such characters are put behind bars, the war against corruption is far from over. Oduk 70 says we have talked about corruption until it has become part of our DNA. In fact, we don't fade away at the mention of it. All we do is celebrate, especially if one of us is our own, is a culprit. Okay. Governor says to the fight against corruption effectively, you must make the people within your organization, department or ministry aware of their roles and responsibilities and those of other staff members. Okay. Alinori says there is no genuine war on graft in Kenya. What is there is mere conversation such as the one you are having right now. We are slowly ratifying corruption in Kenya. Sad reality. Yeah, Lenore. Olelikam says we have all the systems to fight corruption, but they are as good as the people running them. We can only win this war by instilling virtues of integrity and honesty to our children. Okay? See what else you're saying here. All right. Sheikh, the role of the clergy in this, have you played your role in terms of speaking to your congregation against corruption? Because you've clearly read the Quran there and it expressly talks against it. The Bible does the same thing, but we're still seeing it. What more should the religious leaders do then to ensure people stay away from corruption?
Thank you very much. First and foremost, one of the main roles of the religious leaders is to keep reminding people of the responsibility on this world, because human beings, they tend to forget very fast. And one of the reminders that we are doing and we are supposed to do continuously is to instill in the minds of individuals from as early age as possible that this is a vice, this is a sin, something that has been prohibited. And any earning that you earn through corruption or bribery, you are earning haram, unlawful thing. It is important to remind people verses and statements of the previous prophets as they have been teaching this thing, because corruption did not start today. It started a long time ago. Let's just complete that verse that I was reciting before, 28:77, where God says, وَأَحْسِنُوا, do good. And the opposite of doing good is evil. And one of the evil that people practice is corruption. And God says, وَلَا تَبْغِ الْفَسَادَ فِي الْأَرْضِ, and desire not corruption on land. Why? Because إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ الْمُفْسِدِينَ. God dislikes the corruptors. Why does he dislike the corruptors? Because those who practice corruption are cursed in our societies. This is according to the statement of Prophet Muhammad, who says that لَعَنَ اللَّهُ الرَّاشِي وَالْمُرْتَشِي. May the curse of the Almighty God be upon the briber and the bribe recipient. So we are both cursed when we practice this thing. Yeah. And God, the final verse that I wish to recite is verse number 2, verse 188. God says, وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا أَمْوَالَكُمْ بَيْنَكُمْ بِالْبَاطِلِ, and do not consume one another's wealth unjustly. وَتُدْلُوا بِهَا إِلَى الْحُكَّامِ, and send it in bribery to the rulers. وَتُدْلُوا بِهَا إِلَى الْحُكَّامِ لِتَأْكُلُوا فَرِيقًا مِنْ أَمْوَالِ النَّاسِ بِالْإِثْمِ, in order that they might aid you to consume a portion of the wealth of people in sin. while you know, وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ, while you know that you are doing sin, but you are still sinning. So one of the main responsibilities that the religious leaders, the people who get that opportunity of standing in the pulpit and talking to people, this reminder must continue all the way from the mosques, from the churches, from the schools, so that we can still, you know, the more we repeat, the more people understand that indeed this is an evil, and the more people will try to keep themselves away from it. So education and awareness, that is key. Secondly, it is always good to nurture people in terms of leadership, good leadership and governance, and to create equal opportunities to everyone. In other words, to be just. Justice will help us to eradicate this vice in our society, because if justice will not be implemented, people will look for other means of attaining their own rights, and through that they might end up performing or doing some of these vices. In Quran, we are strictly guided that we should not commit any injustice, because that will lead to many vices in our societies. One of the verses in the Holy Quran says that, and do not let the hatred of people present you or lead you from being just. Be just, because that is what is liked by good. Oh. When we are justful, when we are just and we guide people according to good governance, good leadership, and we encourage the leaders to lead by example, then that will help us to have a better society in terms of avoiding these vices. We also remember, Trevor, that individual responsibility is important. You know, as a religious person, or as a person who gets an opportunity of addressing people, you can quote all kinds of verses. You can direct people accordingly. But if there is no individual will, if there is no political will, then it will be difficult to lead people against this thing. Because you can hear all kinds of verses, you can hear all kinds of prophetic directions, but if we are not ready individually to feel that indeed this is a sin, indeed it can destroy me in this world before the next world, then it will be difficult for us to eradicate corruption. So people are always reminded that, and most of the people who commit this, they know that they're committing sin. Sometimes people will not practice corruption openly. People will go to different places. Some even will receive whatever they are receiving in the washrooms and other places, whereby they will not be captured by any individual because they fear that there is a consequence for that. But if only that we could work toward strengthening our faith. You know, Trevor, when we are about to sin, especially when we are doing something, or an individual is doing something that knows this is a sin, there is a voice deep inside the heart that discouraging this individual from this, that remember, you are sinning. You might face the consequences, that this thing will destroy you. So at that particular level, it depends with the level of faith. If this individual, whatever he has been taught, has settled deep inside his heart, then he will remember that whatever I am doing, it is against the will of God. Whatever I am doing, I am sinning. Whatever I am doing, it will destroy my life. So it depends with the level of the faith. If the faith is strong, then it will help that individual to remember the presence of God, the nearness of God, and he feel, no, I should not do this. It is against my values. It is against the teachings that I got last Friday, last Sunday. And by so doing, then he will have obeyed God accordingly, and he will be. So the religious leaders, of course, they do their best, but as they say in Swahili, sorry to say this, ya kuwa unaweza peleka ng'ombe mtoni, lakini huwezi kulazimisha kunywa maji.
But Shamala, you know, it's interesting. Let's now focus on the solutions now. Going forward, what would EACC want to see? And what is the plan?
Before we go to that, Trevor, I think I need to pick up from where Sheikh has left. It's very sad when you read from Kenyans that it is like corruption is part of our DNA. Surely, we should be ashamed of ourselves, if you ask me. The reason being, you need to have that self-examination as an individual before we even come to the institutions. That self-introspection What role am I playing in making it look like it's a culture in Kenya, that it's part of our DNA? Do we feel good when you go into the international fora and you're associated with corruption as a country? Really, just like Sheikh has said, we really need to step back as individuals before we get even to the institutions that are fighting corruption. And just like Senior Counsel has said, the EACC is such a small institution with only about 700 staff that you're supposed to take care of about, what, 50 million Kenyans? If each one of us step back and we introspect, and you ask yourself, by the time you're giving a land registrar money to forge documents, to take somebody's property or public land that is meant for a hospital, a school, what are you doing? To be sincere, what are you doing? What about our children? Do we think about the future when it comes to these things? Now, secondly, I would like to just briefly touch on education. There's a lot that we are doing in our docket of education. Each and every day we are going out there sensitizing members of the public about the need to avoid and not find yourself in a situation where you're going to, like what, aid corruption, maybe bribery, how to avoid it. We have come up with what we call integrity clubs for children, from nursery school all the way to university. We are trying to speak to them, what they are calling culture change. When you speak to a child who is in kindergarten, nursery, they are going to change their ways if you keep on insisting and talking to them, reminding them. The human mind is meant to be reminded about the vice, Now, when it comes to the grown-ups now, we have our National Integrity Academy, NIACA, which was established some time back. We have re-engineered it now. We are talking to the public sector. We are also talking to the private sector. We have trainings on faith-based institutions. What is our role, all of us? Not only going to the DPP, going after illegally acquired assets, but now we have now tried to go back to the soul of the person to find out what can we do and what can we all come together on this table and assist this country? Because at the end of the day, Trevor, you don't have any other Kenya.
Yeah.
This is where you are born. You're bound to live here, and your children will be born here and they will be raised here. The same institutions are the same ones that they will find. The question is, will they find forests? Will they find hospitals? Will they find schools? Or by the time they are born, we'll have consumed all of them. Mm. And we have nothing to run to.
Okay.
You see?
Yeah.
But the solution here is, back to your question, it's about collaboration. All of us, stakeholder. In fact, tomorrow when you're celebrating the Africa Anti-Corruption Day, it's not only about the EACC. You know, the Africa Anti-Corruption is actually, it's led by the Kenya Integrity Forum, which is a whole meeting of stakeholders from the private sector, from the faith-based. We have the judiciary sitting, the Attorney General, and interestingly, actually the patron is the president of this country. So when we sit there and we are celebrating tomorrow, looking at what are the strides we have made, what are the challenges that we are facing, what are the possible solutions? Mm-hmm. Can we all come to the table and try and give solutions as to how we can redeem this country when it comes to corruption?
Yeah.
Yes.
Senior Counsel, what do you think are some of the solutions? And I know this is led by CLIF, which is the Kenya Leadership Integrity Forum, but based on the numbers that Shamala has just given, if you work with 700, say, by 50 million, that's about 72,000. So one official is supposed to take care of 72,000 people. If you look at the 47 counties, it means they only have 15 people in one county. Is that where the challenge lies, that the human resources are too low, or what are the solutions to this? How do we fight corruption at the end of it all?
I think the Ethics Anti-Corruption Commission, because it's a constitutional commission, can work as the architect of the fight against corruption. They can't be the sole implementer. They can't even be the main implementer, because the structure of government and of our country does not allow them to go everywhere. For example, the police is a much bigger law enforcement institution. And so the police should be at the forefront of fighting corruption. The DPP is a much more influential institution in terms of the interaction between law enforcement and the courts. They have to be at the forefront of fighting corruption. So for me, I would say, from the perspective of EACC as the architect, I would like to talk of what I call the 4 I's as the 4 key elements of culture and culture change. So EACC has to focus on the 4 elements. And the first I is individuals. And Judith has talked about individuals. And individuals means the 50 million Kenyans. How do we get the 50 million Kenyans to be convinced about the need to fight corruption? The second I, which is very important, is ideas. And that is why I disagree with one of the commentators who said that you're just talking about corruption. If you don't talk about corruption, it means you've given in completely. There is no fight. So it's important to replace bad ideas with good ideas. And ideas have such tremendous power to accomplish culture change. But ideas should not just be uttered by those of us in this meeting here or in this discussion. It should start with the leaders, and that is why when you focus on individuals, you start by focusing on the leaders, which is what Sheikh has mentioned. You focus on the leaders because leaders have a greater ability to impact on the people. After the individuals and the ideas, you also have to look at institutions, because individuals who have positive ideas build strong institutions. So cultural institutions, you have to look at the institutions of governance, beginning with the cabinet, the office of the president, the state corporations, all the institutions, including EACC. They need to have systems where they measure corruption or the fight against corruption. They have to have processes which encourage people to blow the whistle. They have to have mechanisms of dealing with those who are caught engaging in corruption. So if the institutions are weak, you can have people who, in theory, have good ideas, individuals, but you are not really making progress. So the institution-building aspect of the fight against corruption or to grow the positive culture is important. And then ultimately, you have to measure, because culture is about thousands or millions of human interactions. So the 4th I is interactions. These interactions that you are having, matatus that are on the roads, that are giving daily bribes to police officers, when you're going to government offices, whether it is this registry here or the other, and to get service, you have to facilitate these thousands of interactions. If the corruption is part of, as one of the people said, of our DNA, is not part of our biological DNA. It is an accretion. It is an ugly addition that we need to shake off. But if this is what is happening, if the common person experiences corruption whenever they engage in government or even in private sector, then there's a problem. So we have to focus on each 4, look at the metrics for the fight against corruption, and then find the steps. And we can't isolate the fight against corruption to one institution. I insist. If we do that, we will be doing what Lee Kuan Yew did in Singapore. When you read the story of Singapore and how they became a first world country after being a third world country at the level of Kenya just 50 years ago, 50 odd years ago, it was because there was a personal commitment from the leadership. They built institutions. They ensured that interactions that demonstrated comfort with corruption were penalized. They ensured that the ideas that were being pushed in by the leaders in the churches, in all the institutions, were in support of ethical conduct and integrity. Then they transformed their country. We can do it. Yeah. But I'll tell you one thing that I personally believe. EACC on its own cannot do it. They can be the architect, but they have to recruit all of us, beginning with our leaders in the fight against corruption. And if our leaders think that by giving EACC teeth, they are fighting corruption, then we are headed for failure. Yeah. And that is really the concern that I've been expressing today.
Yeah, and Gishengo, one of the interesting eyes that Kanjama is talking about, the ideas. We've seen some that others might question. I mean, Bere North Member of Parliament Geoffrey Ruku and Homa Bay Member of Parliament Peter Kaluma, they have separately proposed bills in the National Assembly to repeal Section 45, 2, B and C, and Section 64 of the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act 2003, respectively. What effect will those amendments have should they sail through? One of them is saying that you shouldn't bar an individual who has already been convicted of crime from getting appointed or running for office for 10 years because the conviction itself has already served as punishment. Ruku is saying that this process of procurement should just be an issue of administration, not so much a legal issue.
The two proposals by the honourable members, by the members of parliament, around the amendment to ASECA are very, very concerning. And to add to what Kanjama is saying about leaders, and I'll state this because Sheikh leads us in reading the Holy Book. There is no Holy Book, Trevor, that has said they were led by a thief out of the wilderness and they prospered. Not a single one. Even a historical one. Leaders are described by virtues, not vices. By the time we have leaders across board that are known for known vices, then we are setting ourselves up for failure. In matters corruption, in all our values, the minute you allow theft to thrive, any other vice can thrive, and we lose it completely. What are the two amendments doing? The first one by Honorable Roko is extremely worrying because it means the statistics that EACC has been giving us around the reported and prosecuted crimes, they primarily, 70% of them are around procurement. Because our national budget, if it was utilized according to appropriation, 70% ought to be development. And even all these recurrent services, how do you get them in government? You procure. So that is where all the economic crimes and anti-corruption happens. Now, you want to excuse the acts of government officials when they collude, connive, collaborate, cooperate within themselves or with outsiders to be part of these economic crimes, for that to be dealt with administratively. Yet the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act already has that and protects anybody who does this in good faith. They need to display it. But the heart of an economic crime is Section 45 that Honorable Roko has proposed, that there ought to be amendment. Part of what we must do as people who believe in this country, as people who are witnessing the collapse of essential services, that debt was procured, some of it corruptly, or where it was acquired properly, most of it was utilized in corrupt ways, and now we cannot pay it. If we do that, then we are allowing that. Honorable Roko's proposal should not even go to pre-publication stage, because we cannot weaken a critical component of a law that has helped us hold the space for a short period. Yeah. Honorable Kaluma, and his argument is we continue to punish somebody who has served their entire term. Yeah. We should allow them. The purpose of most of the penal provisions is to deter. And because we aspire to have leaders of the highest possible integrity, it should be that every day I do not want to be implicated in an economic crime because I know these are the ramifications. So if I just serve my term, and some of the terms could be 3 years, our prisons are not even foolproof. Some animals in prisons are more equal than others. So I could easily serve my term in luxury in prison. Most probably I'll even have people around me who are still calling me Mheshimiwa, and immediately after that, I come and vie. And most of the time, the amount of money that is lost, not all of it is recovered. So you will have used taxpayers' money to even defend yourself and so on. I don't think this is a very prohibitive I don't think when you weigh the public good of telling people, please do your best if you have ambitions for public office, or and then wait, if you're part of this process, wait for 10 years. I think the public good of protecting Kenyans' resources from being plundered is strong enough to warrant this provision to continue. But to safeguard, I must say this, is to ensure that we do not have people who are politically prosecuted and convicted. That we strengthen our investigation and prosecution processes, because we have seen in many countries where criminal provisions are used to target and attack people in the opposition. So that is an area we need to be wary around. But ultimately, I know this is where we should be going. Parliament and political leadership must stop failing us. They make a mockery of us. We are part of the National Integrity Alliance. We have issued red cards. Every time we are mocked because everybody who is blocked from the ballot immediately is appointed to the highest offices. Surely, Parliament has more resources than us in civil society.
All right. And Sheikh, you mentioned this issue that huwezi peleka ng'ombe mtoni ndo ilazimishe kunywa maji. But what do you recommend going forward now that we are here? What would you like to see strengthened going forward?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I think one of the most important things is to instill the values in our youngsters. Because the Quran clearly says that we cannot change our conditions, or God cannot change our conditions unless we decide to change our own condition. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. So going by the few comments that you read, it is clear that we have negative attitudes about fighting corruption in this country. Until the moment that we will change our attitude and strongly believe that indeed it is possible to face and to win war against corruption, we will go nowhere. Because as they say, negative attitude is like a flat tire. You cannot go anywhere unless you change that particular tire. So we have to change our attitude. And also we are supposed to change our understanding of success on this world. You know, Trevor, when we were in school, we used to be told that soma kwa bidii uendeshe gari kubwa. Soma kwa bidii uishi kwa nyumba kubwa. But most of the time, unfortunately, we were not told how to acquire that car, how to achieve or get the money to buy that particular house. Unfortunately, today, people think that success is, or the value of people is measured not because of their academic success or their qualification. It is measured through the depth of their pockets. So everybody is doing his best to make his pocket is as full as possible so that they can achieve or they can earn that respect in the society. And sometimes you will hear people say that, let me do my best so that I can leave my children in a good condition while they have what they need in this life. But the truth is not what we leave to our children that makes them great. It is what you leave in them in terms of values and in terms of having integrity, in terms of knowing what is right and what is wrong. So if we leave enough in them, we will not need to leave much to them. So what is important is people to understand that in this is a vice. This is a sin. This is something that will destroy us. There is a historian by the name Toynbee. He studied civilizations as to why they rise and fall. And one of the conclusions that he made is that what leads the civilizations to eventually to fail, or the nations or not to prosper, is because of corruption or because of sins. And one of the greatest sins that we are practicing today is indulging in this corruption issue. So people to take that personal responsibility, that indeed I have to contribute to the development of my country. And one of the things that will deter that development is this vice called corruption. And perhaps I may not get enough time again just to address and advise to young people in this country that we have the best example in Prophet Abraham. We all recognize Abraham as a prophet and a father of the prophet. Abraham, he found himself in a very corrupt community, in a very corrupt society. whereby almost everybody was worshipping idols, including his own father. Abraham did not say that this is a family issue. This is a societal issue everybody is doing. He stood out in his community and he said this is wrong. And he fought that evil until to some extent he won the war. So as young people, we have this opportunity of changing the future of our country. Okay. No matter how people are practicing this vice today in our community, we have an opportunity to stand firm and to say that this is wrong and we have to fight it, and so that we can have a better tomorrow for generations to come. And finally, it is important, Trevor, to always have that will of doing good to people without anticipating a reward. Okay. Today it is very difficult for someone to offer you any kind of assistance without anticipating a reward. Leave about that. Sometimes we as Kenyans, we are very much ready to give bribe before even it is requested from us. Perhaps you are following something, it will take 2-3 days, you want shortcuts. Say, how much do you need? I want it in 2 hours. So the process is supposed to take 2 days, but you want to be done 2 hours. Why? Just follow the procedure. Okay. So the most important thing for our generation and our time and our society, let's do the right thing all the time. Okay.
Shamal, as we close on this conversation, and I'd like to hear what you hope the African Anti-Corruption Day tomorrow achieves in the end of it all. But Fred Obachi Machoka, my senior here, is saying, what's the point of spending millions trying to educate our kids on matters integrity, only for top politicians to proudly announce how they bribe parliamentarians and nothing happens?
That's an interesting one. First and foremost, for tomorrow, Kenyans should tune in. There'll be a lecture at the University of Nairobi, I think from 9 to 1. Matters corruption will be talked about, challenges, successes, all those that senior counsel is talking about. But in as much as Fred Obachi is asking why we should spend millions, I'll go back to what Sheikh has said. Do we stop talking about it? Do we stop reminding people that this is a vice? We keep on talking about it and reminding them until they hear. Don't forget that this is our future. The young children are our future. The ones who are grown are now stepping out of the future. Where do we need to change? It is the young ones. That is where the culture, we need to start changing that culture. And the minute you start putting in that this is a vice, this is the right thing to do, just like Sheikh has said, when you go for a service from a government office, you're told wait for 2 weeks. Please stop offering a bribe to get in one day, because you'll still get it. So don't be part of the problem, be part of the solution. Okay. That is one. So we can't stop talking about it, and yes, we will continue spending that money because we will need to reach each and every Kenyan if we have to, and that will involve money. Now, as for the solutions, as I said, collaboration amongst the institutions. Over and above that, I would go back to what the president said, I think, a few months ago, about what we call the AIE holders. These are people who are supposed to be in charge of public funds. I'm happy that the Public Procurement Disposal Act was amended the other day to hold them accountable, individually and personally. Because if you don't look out for public funds that have been allocated to an institution, who should? You're the one in charge. It goes back to the leadership. If you cannot set out the right footing on how we go about our public procurement, how we spend money that Kenyans have paid as taxes, where else can we fall back to? It's very critical that the AIE holders are held accountable. That is one of another solution as to how we are going to fight this vice. I would also urge institutions, and especially the public sector, public institutions. You find that sometimes when you're carrying out investigations, you'll find evidence is being destroyed. I don't know whether it's out of being scared that you'll be implicated in it, but the minute we ask for documents, especially in some counties, I'm not afraid to mention Migori and Homa Bay, they burnt down the offices after we served them with a letter that we needed some particular documents. But the next time we were going, they were told there was a fire at 4 a.m. in that particular office, and that is where all the documents had been kept. Really, I think it goes back to introspection. You ask yourself as a Kenyan, now when I burn these documents, where are we headed? And maybe it's not even you who's being implicated. You're trying to assist somebody else. So I think even institutions need to rise above and try and assist us fight this vice. Just like our senior counsel Kanjama is saying, it's not our war alone. It's a combination of each and every one of us to come to this table and speak about it. If it's in the police, we need the IG in it.
Yeah.
If it's the office of the president, of course we are seeing the leaders are in it also, talking about it every day. The other day we saw the president get involved in the KEMSA scandal, and the next day when they were mentioned, he pulled down the permanent secretary. He told us, step down. The CEO was told, step down until investigations are done.
Yeah.
At least something was done. When it came to the sugar scandal, individuals were actually touched, and the president said, I don't want to see them in office. What are they doing there? How can we have sugar circulating?
Yeah.
So that positive step, it is a day at a time and one step at a time.
Okay.
All right, Trevor?
Yeah.
So all of us coming together, we are going to make some progress.
All right.
But we cannot stop talking about it.
Okay. Senior Counsel, closing remarks? What is the one thing you'd like Kenyans to hear from you tonight?
I think the battle that we are in is ultimately a battle to change behavior. This past weekend, I was listening to a conversation by a certain leadership expert called Dr. Kitawi, and he used the model of a tree. And he said that to change behavior, you start by changing the roots. The roots cannot be seen. And the roots is our belief system or our vision. And that is what Sheikh has been talking about. And then you go to the trunk of the tree, which can be seen. It's strong. It carries the tree. And the trunk is our values. We need to have really strong principles that what enable us do what we should do. So you see, you have your strong vision, you have your values, and you have to help instill the right values. That's why there needs to be a lot of communication. But values are not just instilled by hearing. Values are instilled by seeing. And that is why the example that has been given by Fred Obachi Machoka of a leader saying that we gave bribes to MPs is very damaging, because 1,000 words, 10,000 songs can be destroyed by what we are seeing of our leaders. So we need strong values, and that means you have to target the leaders, and when they go off board, you have to take strong action. And then you have the branches, and the branches are now those habits that we develop. We could call them the virtues. We have to develop good habits. I have to get used to saying no when I'm asked for a bribe, or I have to get used to restraining myself from asking for a bribe if I'm in a situation of either being a public officer to provide a service and so on. And all of us in our different situations, as professionals, as workers, we do get situations which are very difficult for us. It's not easy to wait for 2 weeks, Judy, when sometimes you need a service in a day. I'm running a law firm and my client is asking me, Kanjama, are you not able to get me this transaction done within 2 or 3 days? And if I'm there, I'm not able to get the transaction done, the business goes to someone else. So it's not easy, but you have to be ready to pay the price individually as institutions, because sometimes you may have personal values of integrity, but when you come together as an institution, you lose all your personal values, because now you are corporate. You're not thinking about yourself. You're saying it's the organization. Yeah. Then after those habits which are developed by good actions repeated, then the fruits is now the character. And you see, we're asking ourselves, how do we get that fruits of a society of integrity? You have to focus on the roots, on the trunk, and on the branches. So my appeal to Kenyans is that both individually and in our institutions or groups in our communities, we have to be clear that the fight against corruption involves a mind shift, a paradigm shift. That's our belief system. It involves instilling in ourselves very strong values of hard work, of integrity. I think Diana has mentioned some of the values we need to have. And even our laws are part of our expression of our values. And then it requires those repeated actions. Sometimes they're unseen, uncelebrated, but those are the actions that will create the new backbone of a society of integrity. Okay. And we need to be able to measure them, because we can't talk of fighting corruption if our actions and omissions are saying the contrary.
Okay. Gishengo, closing remarks.
My closing remarks would be, Kenyans, we need to use the resources we have to shape the country that we need. And in the spirit of storytelling, I am not at the level of Kanjava, but I listened to a podcast on a woman who was called Shia Rome from Tharaka-Nithi, and she led battles for her community's land in the 18th century using a walking stick. Much, much later, after like 3 years, is when she started using a shield. Kenyans, we have our eyes, we have our voice, we have our hands. It is time we made our public resources count. Right now we're in the conversation about we are the sovereign. That is why we are contesting certain things. Yeah. As the sovereign, can we define that particular culture that we require? And if there is one space that we must actively defend, is the procurement space in government, and also the leaders that we get.
Okay.
The recent experiences and what we are likely to experience moving forward, the high taxation is an impact of us not utilizing our resources in the right way. NHIF, the harrowing stories of NHIF are because somebody allowed another, very knowingly, to bring medication that was not supposed to treat that disease, and they continued. They made money. Why are Kenyans making so much money? Because the services in this country don't work. So I have to have money to go and get services privately. Let us use our eyes, our ears, our voice to fashion the country that we need and ensure that we have transparency, accountability, and participation across all processes, democratic, social, and economic. Yeah. The tree, as has been described, just in all our senses.
All right.
Yeah.
That's where we leave it for now. Thank you so much for making time. And tomorrow marks the African Anti-Corruption Day. You said there's a lecture at the University of Nairobi. Is it open to the public?
Yeah, it's open to the public, yes.
All right, so you can invite them if they...
Yes, they are welcome.
Yeah.
All right, brilliant.
And there's a People's Summit at Fungamano.
Thank you so much for making time. Sheikh Mohammed, Sheikh Director, Dawam Jamia Mosque in Nairobi. Judith Shamala, Assistant Director, Asset Tracing at the EACC. Charles Kanjama, Senior Counsel, and Diana Gishengo, National Coordinator, TISA. Santini Sana for making time this evening. And most important, thank you all for the feedback that you've sent through. Remember, fighting corruption starts with you. All right? My name is Trevor Mbija on behalf of the entire team that made this possible. We say good night and God bless.